does not begin with the outside, but with the heart. He doesn't start with muscles or stature, but with character, endurance, and humility. God is not interested in how tall a man stands, but in how deeply his roots grow into truth, integrity, and love. God builds a man through seasons, through struggles, and through silence. He takes him through valleys not to break him, but to shape him. Through rejection, the man learns acceptance from the one who never lets go. Through pain, he discovers purpose. Through waiting, he develops patience. And through loss, he gains wisdom that cannot be taught by comfort. When God builds a man, he places him in situations where he has no choice but to rely on divine strength. He removes crutches, strips away pride, and allows the man to be emptied so he can be filled with courage, grace, and faith. It's not a quick process, nor is it always pleasant, but every wound becomes a testimony, every setback a setup, and every failure a foundation for something greater. God builds a man who can lead without needing to control, love without needing to be loved back, and give without expecting anything in return. This man is not driven by applause or recognition, but by purpose and calling. He knows that his value does not come from what he has, but from who he belongs to. Such a man becomes a pillar in his family, a light in his community, and a voice of truth in a noisy world. He is not perfect, but he is growing. He is not without flaws, but he is being refined. And he knows that every day he is still under construction, not by human hands, but by the hands of the Creator. When God builds a man, he builds someone the world cannot shake, because the foundation is not sand but stone. A man molded by God stands firm, walks humbly, and lives boldly, not for his glory, but for God's. When God begins the process of building a man, he does not look at the surface. He does not measure a man by how he looks, how wealthy he is, or how much he is admired by others. God's eyes do not see as man sees. Where people are drawn to charisma, style, or public success, God looks directly into the heart. His work begins in the unseen places, the inner life, the hidden struggles, the quiet moments no one else notices. That's where God starts to shape a man, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The world often defines strength by outward appearance, broad shoulders, commanding voice, influence, or a strong social image. But God defines strength by what lies beneath the surface. He looks for humility, for truthfulness, for a willingness to surrender. Before a man can lead others, God will often lead him into solitude. Before he can speak with wisdom, God teaches him in silence. This is where character is formed, not when the spotlight is on, but when no one is watching. God does not rush the process. He works patiently, allowing time, pressure, and even hardship to mold the heart of the man he is building. Character is not built in ease. Integrity is not formed in comfort. Humility does not grow when everything goes right. These traits are cultivated when a man faces failure and still chooses to do what is right, when he is misunderstood but remains faithful, when he is tempted to cut corners but decides to walk in honesty. God is interested in a man's reactions in the small, private tests because those reveal who he really is. These private battles are often more important than public victories. God will often place a man in situations where he has no one to impress, where applause is absent and recognition is nowhere to be found. Why? Because in those moments, a man learns to value God's approval over man's. He begins to care more about being right with God than looking good to others. It is in the quiet that his motives are purified. It is in the stillness that God teaches him how to listen. This is how God builds trust, both in the man and through the man. God values integrity more than reputation. Reputation is what others think you are. Integrity is who you really are. And God is far more concerned with who a man is in private than how he appears in public. This is why God often strips away the distractions of fame, fortune, or comfort. He removes the masks, the props, and the excuses so that the real man can emerge. A man who stands on truth, not trends. A man who speaks with honesty, even when it's costly. A man whose yes means yes, and whose no means no. Humility is another key foundation that God lays early in the process. He knows that pride is dangerous, that it blinds, isolates, and ultimately destroys. So God often allows a man to experience failure or disappointment, not to shame him, but to humble him, not to break his spirit, but to break his ego. A humble man is teachable. He doesn't pretend to know everything. He is quick to apologize, slow to boast, and willing to serve. He puts others first, not because he is weak, but because he is strong enough to do so. Humility is not thinking less of oneself, but thinking of oneself less. And that mindset opens the door for God to work freely. When God builds a man, he is not interested in how quickly the world notices him. He is more concerned with how deeply the man is rooted in his truth. Outward success may come later, but it is never the goal. God would rather have a man who walks faithfully in the dark than one who shines brightly without substance. He is not impressed with talent without character or leadership without integrity. He desires wholeness, and that always starts from within. In the end, the man that God builds is not one who is merely strong on the outside. He is strong in his convictions, steady in trials, and sincere in his walk. He may not look impressive by the world's standards, but his heart reflects the craftsmanship of the Creator. And that kind of man, shaped by God from the inside out, is the kind who can truly impact the world. Struggles and trials are not signs that God has abandoned a man. Rather, they are often the very tools God uses to shape him, refine him, and prepare him for the purpose that lies ahead. It is through pain, silence, rejection, and loss that a man discovers who he truly is, and more importantly, who God is. These difficult seasons are not punishments. They are divine instruments. God allows them with intention, not to destroy a man, but to develop in him a strength that cannot be shaken by circumstances or opinions. Pain is often the beginning of transformation. It has a way of revealing weaknesses, tearing down false confidence, and exposing areas that need healing or correction. In the midst of pain, a man is brought face to face with his limits. He realizes that his own strength is not enough. That's when he begins to lean on God. Not casually, but completely. Pain pushes him to prayer. It draws him into a deeper dependence, a raw and honest relationship with the one who truly knows him. And through that process, God does his most powerful work. He starts rebuilding the man from the inside out, not by removing the pain immediately, but by walking with him through it. Silence is another tool God uses, and it can be one of the hardest to endure. There are times when God seems quiet, when prayers feel unanswered and the heavens feel closed. But in those moments, something deeper is happening. Silence teaches patience. It tests trust. It forces a man to seek not just God's hand, but his heart. In silence, a man learns to wait, not passively, but faithfully. He begins to understand that God is not absent, but working behind the scenes, preparing what's needed and developing endurance. In silence, God teaches a man how to stand still and believe, even when there is no visible sign of progress. This kind of faith becomes a foundation that no storm can shake. Rejection is often misunderstood. It hurts deeply, especially when it comes from people we love or situations we desired. But rejection in God's hands becomes redirection. He uses it to close doors that would lead us off course. He uses it to strip away the need for approval and to remind us that our identity is not in the acceptance of people, but in his love. A man who has faced rejection and still chooses to walk in obedience is a man who understands the value of God's calling over human affirmation. He no longer lives to please the crowd, but to fulfill purpose. Rejection breaks the pride that seeks validation and builds the courage to stand alone if necessary. Loss, whether it be of relationships, opportunities, or even dreams, can feel devastating. But even in loss, God is at work. Sometimes he takes things away to make room for better things. Sometimes he removes what we cling to so that we will cling to him. Loss can break a man open, but in God's hands, that brokenness becomes sacred. It becomes the soil where compassion grows, where empathy is born, and where a deeper understanding of life and eternity begins to form. A man who has experienced loss and still chooses to move forward becomes a vessel of strength for others. He becomes someone who can comfort because he has been comforted, who can lead others through pain because he has walked through it himself. These trials are not meaningless. They are not random. They are tailored by the loving hands of a Father who sees not just the present, but the future. God knows what kind of man is needed for the calling ahead, and so he shapes that man through real-life experiences, through seasons of pressure, testing, and waiting. He doesn't build shallow men. He builds men of depth, men who don't collapse under stress because their strength is not skin deep, but soul deep. In the end, the man who has been through struggles and remained faithful comes out stronger, wiser, and more grounded. He carries the marks of battle, but also the lessons of grace. He understands that the journey was necessary, even if it was painful. And he is no longer afraid of trials, because he knows that God uses them not as a form of punishment, but as preparation. Such a man becomes unshakable, not because life has been easy, but because God has been faithful through it all. Dependence on God is essential. It is not a lesson that is learned in ease or abundance, but rather in the absence of control and the stripping away of comfort. When a man has everything going for him, when life seems manageable and plans are unfolding as expected, it is easy to fall into the illusion that he is in charge, that his own efforts, wisdom, or resources are enough. But God, in his wisdom, allows moments when that illusion is shattered. He removes the sense of control, lets plans fall apart, and brings a man to the end of himself, not to punish him, but to lead him to the only place where true strength is found. There is a deep, life-changing transformation that takes place when a man realizes he cannot do it on his own. When his plans fail, his strength fades, and his understanding hits a wall, he is faced with a choice: to keep striving in his own power or to surrender and lean entirely on God. That moment of surrender is sacred. It is the doorway to real power, not the power that comes from position, success, or self-confidence, but the power that comes from knowing the one who holds all things together. God often removes comfort intentionally. He allows disruption in areas where we once felt secure: jobs, relationships, finances, health, so that we will stop relying on temporary things and start building our lives on what is eternal. Comfort, while pleasant, can become a trap. It can lull a man into spiritual complacency, making him believe that as long as everything is smooth, God is near. But sometimes the absence of comfort is the very evidence of God's work in a man's life. It is in discomfort that dependence is forged. It is in the wilderness that trust is refined. Control is another illusion that God gently and sometimes forcefully removes. The human desire to manage outcomes, to predict the future, and to avoid risk is strong. We make plans, set goals, and expect life to cooperate. But God does not exist to fit into our schedules or bless our plans. He wants to guide, not follow, and to lead a man, God often allows him to lose control of timing, direction, and even outcomes, so that he learns to walk by faith, not by sight. When a man can no longer depend on his own wisdom, he begins to seek God's wisdom. When he cannot rely on his own strength, he begins to draw from God's strength. When he realizes he cannot open doors on his own, he begins to pray for God's favor. This shift is powerful. It doesn't make a man weaker, it makes him unshakable, because he no longer stands on his own limited ability, but on the unlimited power of God. He no longer reacts in panic, but responds in faith. Dependence on God does not mean passivity or weakness. It means living with the awareness that without Him, nothing of lasting value can be accomplished. It means moving forward with boldness, not because the path is clear, but because God is leading the way. It means waking up each day with the humility to say, God, I need you, and the confidence to believe, God is with me. That posture changes everything. It shifts a man's focus from performance to obedience, from outcomes to faithfulness. This kind of dependence is not built overnight. It is cultivated over time through repeated experiences where God proves Himself faithful. A man begins to see patterns, how God made a way when there seemed to be none, how He brought peace in chaos, how He opened doors that no one else could. These experiences form a track record, a personal history of God's faithfulness, and they anchor the man's trust even in the unknown. In time, the man who has learned to depend on God becomes someone who is steady, even when the world around him shakes. He doesn't panic when plans fall apart. He doesn't lose hope when things don't go as expected, because his faith is no longer in the plan, it is in the planner. His confidence is not in the path, it is in the one who walks beside him. And that kind of dependence is not weakness, it is wisdom, it is strength, it is the foundation of a life that cannot be moved. God builds selfless leaders, men who lead not for personal gain, recognition, or status, but out of love, humility, and a deep sense of purpose. These men are shaped by God's hands to put others before themselves, to serve rather than be served, and to give without expecting anything in return. Such leadership is rare in a world often driven by ambition, competition, and ego, but it is the kind of leadership that transforms lives, communities, and even nations. A man built by God understands that true leadership flows from the heart. It is not about power or control, but about love and responsibility. God's example of leadership is clear. He leads by serving. Jesus, the ultimate leader, did not seek status or applause. Instead, he humbled himself, washing the feet of his disciples and laying down his life for others. A God-built man follows this example, recognizing that leadership is about sacrifice and compassion. Leading with love means that a man cares deeply for those he leads. He listens to their needs, encourages their growth, and protects them from harm. Love in leadership creates trust. It breaks down walls of fear and suspicion and opens the door to authentic connection. When a man leads with love, people feel valued, seen, and supported. They know that their leader is not just interested in what they can do, but who they are. This kind of leadership inspires loyalty, respect, and unity, and it creates an environment where people can thrive. Giving without expecting anything in return is another hallmark of God-built leadership. Many leaders give only when there is something to gain, recognition, favor, or reward, but a selfless leader gives freely, knowing that the true reward is in the act of giving itself. He does not keep score or ask, "What's in it for me?" but rather looks for ways to bless others generously. This kind of giving builds community and fosters generosity in others. It breaks the cycle of selfishness and plants seeds of kindness that grow far beyond the leader's immediate reach. Selfless leaders are also guided by purpose, not pride. Pride can blind a man, making him more concerned about his image, his status, or his legacy than about the people he leads. Pride fuels selfish ambition and causes leaders to lose sight of their true mission. In contrast, a man built by God has a clear sense of purpose. He knows why he leads and whom he ultimately serves. His motivation is not personal glory, but fulfilling the calling God has placed on his life. This purpose-driven leadership is steady and focused. It is not easily distracted by praise or criticism because it is anchored in something far greater than the leader himself. A God-built leader is willing to make hard decisions for the good of others, even when those decisions come at a personal cost. He does not avoid responsibility or seek the easy path. Instead, he embraces challenges as opportunities to grow and to serve more faithfully. This courage is born from a deep trust in God's guidance and provision. Knowing that he is accountable to God first, a selfless leader acts with integrity, honesty, and fairness, even when it is difficult. Such leadership impacts more than just the immediate circle. A selfless leader influences families, workplaces, churches, and communities. His example challenges others to rise above selfishness and pride and to pursue lives marked by love, generosity, and purpose. The ripple effect of one selfless leader can transform generations. Being built by God as a selfless leader also means a man is constantly being refined. He is humble enough to recognize his own shortcomings and willing to seek help and correction. He does not rely on his own strength or wisdom, but continually draws on God's guidance and grace. This humility keeps him grounded and open to growth, preventing arrogance and burnout. Ultimately, a man built by God as a selfless leader reflects the heart of the Creator, who gave everything out of love and calls his followers to do the same. Such a man leads with a servant's heart, gives generously without strings attached, and pursues a purpose far greater than himself. In doing so, he becomes a powerful instrument for good in the world, a beacon of hope and strength for those around him, and a true reflection of God's love in action. True strength is grounded in faith. It is not found in physical power, wealth, reputation, or any of the temporary things that the world often celebrates. Instead, it comes from a deep, unshakable connection to spiritual truth. A man whose foundation is built on faith has a strength that cannot be destroyed by circumstances, criticism, or failure. This strength is steady and enduring because it is anchored in something eternal and unchanging. Faith gives a man a perspective that goes beyond the immediate and the visible. While others may be overwhelmed by difficulties or swayed by fleeting success, a man grounded in faith understands that life is part of a much bigger story. He sees challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to grow and to trust God more deeply. His hope is not in what he can control, but in God's promises, which never fail. This perspective gives him peace in the midst of chaos and confidence when the future looks uncertain. Because his strength is rooted in faith, such a man is not dependent on external validation. He does not need the applause of people or the approval of society to feel worthy. He knows his value comes from God alone, and that assurance frees him from fear and insecurity. When criticism comes, he listens with humility and discernment, but is not shaken by attacks or rejection. When success comes, he remains humble and focused, recognizing that it is God who blesses and sustains him. This kind of strength is mature and balanced, avoiding both arrogance and despair. Faith also gives a man resilience. Life is full of trials, disappointments, and setbacks, but a man grounded in faith does not collapse under pressure. He endures because he believes in a higher purpose and trusts that God is working even when he cannot see it. This resilience is not a matter of stubbornness or blind optimism. It is a confident assurance that God's plan is good and that he is always present, even in the darkest time. This belief fuels perseverance and courage, enabling a man to keep moving forward when others might give up. Moreover, true strength, grounded in faith, is evident in a man's character. It shapes how he treats others and how he handles power and responsibility. A man rooted in spiritual truth leads with integrity, compassion, and justice. He stands up for what is right, even when it is difficult or unpopular. His faith gives him the moral compass to navigate life's complexities without compromising his values. This inner strength inspires trust and respect from those around him because it is consistent and reliable. Spiritual strength also transforms a man's priorities. Instead of chasing temporary pleasures or accumulating material wealth, he seeks to live a life of meaning and service. He understands that the treasures of this world are fleeting, but that the rewards of a faithful life are eternal. This understanding guides his decisions, shapes his relationships, and directs his energy toward what truly matters. His faith helps him to focus on building a legacy of love, kindness, and faithfulness that will outlast him. Being grounded in faith does not mean a man is perfect or never struggles. In fact, faith often grows through struggle. A man may face doubt, fear, or pain, but his faith gives him a foundation to stand on even when he is weak. He learns to rely not on his own strength, but on God's power made perfect in weakness. This humility makes his strength even more authentic, because it acknowledges that true power comes from surrender, not self-sufficiency. Ultimately, a man whose strength is grounded in faith becomes unshakable, because his foundation is not built on shifting sands, but on the rock of spiritual truth. No matter what storms come his way, he stands firm. His faith is his anchor, his shield, and his source of courage. This kind of strength is not always visible or loud, but it is enduring and powerful. It is the strength that carries a man through life's toughest battles and enables him to impact the world with grace, wisdom, and love. The process is ongoing. A man formed by God understands that becoming who he is meant to be is not a one-time event or a destination reached quickly. Rather, it is a lifelong journey of growth, learning, and refinement. He knows that no matter how much he has accomplished or how far he has come, there is always more work to be done in shaping his character, strengthening his faith, and aligning his life with God's purpose. This ongoing process is both humbling and hopeful, reminding him that growth never stops and that God's hand is continually at work in his life. A man shaped by God embraces this truth with patience. He does not expect to be perfect overnight or to have all the answers right away. Instead, he accepts that life is full of seasons, times of planting, growing, pruning, and sometimes even waiting in the silence. Each season serves a purpose in the development of his soul. Sometimes growth is visible and rapid, like a tree bursting into bloom. Other times, it is slow and hidden beneath the surface, like roots steadily taking hold in the earth. He understands that even when progress feels small or invisible, God is working deeply within him. Because the process is ongoing, a man formed by God is always learning. He remains teachable and open to correction, knowing that wisdom comes through experience, reflection, and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. He listens carefully to God's word, to trusted mentors, and to the quiet nudges of conscience. He does not become arrogant or complacent, but keeps his heart soft and his mind open. This humility allows him to grow, even in areas where he thought he was strong. He understands that learning is a sign of maturity, not weakness. The ongoing nature of God's work also means that a man is constantly being refined. Like gold purified by fire, he is tested and polished through life's challenges and trials. These moments of difficulty are not seen as punishment or failure, but as opportunities for deeper transformation. Each challenge exposes impurities, pride, impatience, fear, and God uses these moments to cleanse and strengthen him. This refining process is sometimes painful, but the man who trusts God knows it is necessary for becoming the person God intended. He welcomes refinement because he desires to be more like Christ in thought, word, and deed. A man formed by God also recognizes that the journey of growth requires perseverance. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when progress seems to stall, but he refuses to give up. He understands that the path to maturity is rarely easy or straightforward. Growth often requires discipline, sacrifice, and sometimes walking through seasons of uncertainty. Yet he holds on to the promise that God is faithful, that the work God begins in him will be carried on to completion. This perseverance strengthens his character and deepens his faith. The ongoing process also shapes a man's relationships. As he grows, he becomes more patient, loving, and understanding with others. He learns to forgive more freely and to serve without expectation. His experiences teach him empathy for those who are struggling or still early in their own journeys. Because he knows his own imperfections and the grace he has received, he extends grace to others. This maturity in relationships reflects the ongoing work of God's shaping hand in his heart. A man formed by God does not rush the process or compare his progress to others. He runs his own race, focused on becoming the best version of himself in God's eyes. He is content to grow step by step, trusting that God's timing is perfect. This patience protects him from discouragement and envy, and it fuels a deep, enduring hope. He celebrates milestones but does not become proud, knowing that the journey is far from over. Ultimately, the ongoing process of growth and refinement reveals the nature of God's love and commitment. It shows that God is not interested in instant results or superficial changes. Instead, he is deeply invested in the long-term transformation of a man's heart and character. God walks with him through every season, every challenge, and every triumph. He gently corrects, patiently waits, and powerfully empowers. This ongoing work is a testament to God's faithfulness and a source of encouragement for the man who is being shaped. In embracing this ongoing process, a man becomes more than just a person shaped by circumstance. He becomes a person continually shaped by the Creator. He grows in grace, knowledge, and strength. He learns to surrender daily to God's will and to trust the journey, no matter how long it takes. And in the end, this lifelong process leads him closer to the fullness of who God designed him to be, strong, humble, wise, and deeply rooted in God's love.